the curse of Shadar Logoth, the taint of Mashadar, and a dagger of evil. Good evening and welcome to another episode of our Sleep to Lore series. I am very happy to have you here with me tonight as we settle down for a long and quiet journey into the history of a world that is very dear to many of us. Tonight we are going to talk about the Wheel of Time. Specifically, we're going to talk about a place that is darker than almost anywhere else in that universe. We are going to explore the ruins of a city called Shadar Logoth, and we will talk about the curse that lives there. We will talk about a man named Mordeth and a dagger with a ruby in the hilt and a fog that eats souls. It is a story about how good intentions can turn into the worst kind of evil. If you enjoy these stories and you find that they help you relax or fall asleep, please consider subscribing to the channel or leaving a comment down below. It really helps the channel grow and it lets me know that you are enjoying the content. Before we begin, I have a question for you to answer in the comments section. It is a simple question. If you found a cursed treasure in a ruined city, and you knew it was dangerous but it was worth a fortune, would you touch it? Let me know what you think in the comments. Now I want you to get comfortable, lie back and let your shoulders drop. Take a deep breath and let go of the stress of the day. We are going back in time. We are going back thousands of years before the main story of the Wheel of Time begins. We are going to a time when the world was different and nations that are now dust were once powerful empires. We are going to watch a beautiful white city turn into a shadow. Chapter 1. The Fall of Aridhol. To understand the curse of Shadar Logoth, we have to go back to the Trolloc Wars. This was a time of chaos and destruction that lasted for hundreds of years. It was a time when the shadows sought to overrun the world of men. The armies of the Dark One poured out of the Great Blight in numbers that could not be counted. They burned and they killed and they destroyed everything in their path. But humanity did not stand alone and they did not stand weak. In those days, the nations of men were united in a great alliance known as the Compact of the 10 Nations. These 10 nations were strong, they were wealthy and they were proud. They had cities that were marvels of architecture and art. They had the Aes Sedai to guide them, and they had great kings and queens to lead them. One of the strongest of these nations was called Aridhol. The capital city of this nation was also named Aridhol. It stood on the banks of the river Aridhol. It was a beautiful place. The stories say that Aridhol was a city of light. It had high walls made of white stone that gleamed in the sun. It had 9 great towers that reached up toward the sky with domes covered in gold. It was a center of trade and a center of learning. The people of Aridhol were known for their courage and their strength. They were close allies with the nation of Manetheren, which was famous for its stubborn fighters. The king of Aridhol during the later years of the Trolloc Wars was a man named Balwer. King Balwer was a good man at the beginning. He loved his city and he loved his people. He wanted to protect them from the Trollocs and the Myrddraal and the Dreadlords that threatened to destroy everything. But the war was long. It dragged on for year after year and generation after generation. The people of Aridhol grew tired. They grew fearful. They saw their sons and daughters go off to war and never come back. They saw the shadow gaining ground. They began to wonder if the light could ever truly win. Despair is a dangerous thing. It makes the mind weak and it makes the heart open to bad ideas. It was into this atmosphere of fear and desperation that a man arrived at the court of King Balwer. His name was Jara Kopan, but history remembers him by a different name. History remembers him as Mordeth. He did not look like a monster. He did not look like a servant of the Dark One. He looked like a wise man. He was charismatic and he was intelligent. He spoke with confidence. He told the king that he knew how to win the war. He said that he had studied the nature of the shadow and he knew why the forces of the light were losing. Mordeth became the counselor to the king. He whispered in the king's ear. He said that the problem with the forces of the light was that they were too soft. He said that they were held back by their own rules and their own morality. He argued that you cannot fight the Dark One if you are afraid to get your hands dirty. He said that to defeat an enemy as cruel and as evil as the Shadow, you must use the Shadow's own tactics against it. You must be harder than the stone. You must be colder than the winter. You must be willing to do anything to survive. This philosophy was a poison, but it was a sweet poison. It tasted like hope. King Balwer listened. He wanted to save his city so badly that he was willing to listen to anything. Mordeth told him that the victory of the light was all that mattered. It did not matter how that victory was achieved. If you had to torture a prisoner to get information that would save lives, then it was the right thing to do. If you had to kill the innocent to stop the guilty, then it was necessary. The end justified the means. Slowly, the city of Aridhol began to change. It did not happen overnight. It happened over weeks and months and years. The white walls were still there, and the golden dome still shone in the sun, but the spirit of the city was darkening. The people began to adopt the hardness of their king and his counselor. They stopped smiling at strangers. They began to look at everyone with suspicion. If a neighbor acted strangely, they would report them to the guards. They believed that anyone could be a dark friend. They believed that the only way to be safe was to suspect everyone. The atmosphere in Aridhol became heavy. It was a feeling of constant oppression. The guards in the streets became brutal. They would arrest people for the smallest reasons. They would beat people in the public squares to show that they were strong against the shadow. And the people watched and they nodded. They thought this was necessary. They thought this was strength. They did not see that they were becoming exactly like the thing they were fighting. The Aes Sedai saw what was happening. They sensed the darkness growing in Aridhol. It was not the darkness of the shadow. It was something else. It was a human darkness. It was a darkness made of fear and hate and suspicion. The Aes Sedai tried to warn King Balwer. They told him that Mordeth was dangerous. They told him that this path would lead to ruin. But Mordeth had already poisoned the king's mind against the Aes Sedai. He told the king that the Aes Sedai were weak. He said they wanted to control Aridhol. He said they were holding the city back. Eventually, King Balwer turned against the Aes Sedai. He kicked them out of the city. He declared that Aridhol did not need the White Tower. This was a shocking event. In the time of the Compact, the Aes Sedai were the glue that held the nations together. To reject them was to reject the alliance. But Aridhol did not care. They believed they were the only ones who truly knew how to fight the war. The isolation of Aridhol grew worse. They stopped trading with their neighbors. They stopped sending messages to their allies. Even their friendship with Manetheren was broken. There is a story about the son of King Balwer. He was the one person who tried to resist Mordeth. He saw that the counselor was evil. He tried to tell his father that they were losing their souls. But Mordeth was too strong. He twisted the king's love for his son. He convinced the king that the prince was weak. He convinced the king that the prince was a traitor to the cause of victory. In the end, the king had his own son executed. It was done in the name of the light. It was done to show that Aridhol had the will to do what was necessary. After the death of the prince, the last bit of light in Aridhol went out. The city became a prison. The gates were locked. No one was allowed to leave, and no one was allowed to enter. The people lived in terror of each other. A husband would betray his wife if he thought it would save him. A child would accuse a parent. The hate in the city became so thick that it felt like a physical weight. It was a hate for the shadow, but it was still hate. And hate is a food. It feeds things that should not exist. The transformation was nearing its end. The city was no longer really fighting the Trolloc Wars. It was fighting itself. The armies of the shadow were moving closer, but the people of Aridhol were too busy watching each other to notice. They had become so obsessed with finding evil that they created it. They created a new kind of evil. It was not the evil of the Dark One, which desires destruction and chaos. It was an evil born of the desire for order and purity, but twisted until it was unrecognizable. Then came the end. It did not come with an army of Trollocs breaking down the gates. It did not come with fire and sword from the outside. The doom of Aridhol came from the inside. The hate and the suspicion and the cruelty of the people had nowhere to go. It had built up for years inside the walls. It saturated the stones of the streets. It soaked into the wood of the houses. It filled the air like a smog. This accumulated evil began to take a form. It coalesced. It became a mist. At first, it was just a haze in the streets at night, a pale grey fog that drifted along the ground. But this fog was hungry. It was the physical manifestation of the city's madness. It was named Mashadar. The name means something like the waiting shadow or the shadow that is here. One night, the fog rose up. It swept through the city. It flowed through the windows and under the doors. It did not break anything. It did not burn anything. It simply touched. And whatever living thing it touched, it consumed. It did not eat the flesh in the way a beast would. It drained the life. It drained the soul. It left the bodies behind, but they were empty. Or perhaps it ate the bodies too in the end, leaving nothing but dust. The legends are not always clear on the mechanics, but the result was absolute. Every man and every woman and every child in Aridhol died that night. The king died on his throne. The guards died at their posts. The people died in their beds. The only person who did not die was Mordeth. He was the architect of this doom, and in a way he became part of it. He was trapped there. He was caught in the web he had spun. He did not die, but he did not truly live either. He became a ghost of the ruins. He was bound to the city forever. When the sun rose the next morning, the city of Aridhol was silent. The white walls still gleamed. The golden domes still sparkled. From the outside it looked perfect. It looked like a city ready to face the day. But there was no sound, there were no voices, there were no dogs barking, there were not even any birds. The city was empty. It had become a tomb. The armies of the shadow eventually arrived at the city. The Trollocs and the Dreadlords came to conquer Aridhol. They found the gates open. They found the city defenseless. But when they entered, they found something that terrified even them. They found Mashadar. The Trollocs are creatures of the Dark One. They are made of evil and violence. But Mashadar was an evil that fought the shadow. It was an acid that burned the dark. The Trollocs who entered the city did not come out. The Murdral, who fear almost nothing, learned to fear this place. The city of Aridhol ceased to exist in the minds of men. The name was cursed. People stopped saying it. They gave it a new name. They called it Shadar Logoth. In the old tongue, this means the shadows waiting, or simply the place where the shadow waits. It became a scar on the land. The compact of the 10 nations eventually fell. The Trolloc Wars ended and new nations rose and fell. The borders changed, the maps were redrawn, but Shadar Logoth remained. It stood there for 2,000 years. It was a white spot on the map that everyone avoided. The Aes Sedai forbade anyone from going there. The warders taught their students to stay away. Even the birds and the beasts knew better. You would never see a bird fly over the walls of Shadar Logoth. You would never see a deer graze near its gates. The nature of the world recoiled from it. It was a hole in the pattern of the world, a place where the rules of life did not apply. Inside the walls, the city was preserved. Time did not touch it in the normal way. The buildings did not crumble as fast as they should have. The statues stood tall and proud. The fountains were dry, but they were not broken. It was a museum of the moment of its death, and in the shadows of the palaces and the cellars, something moved. The mist, Mashadar. It wandered the streets. It was mindless, and it was patient. It waited for something to come. It waited for something to eat. And Mordeth waited too. He was a prisoner of the mist, but he was distinct from it. He was a consciousness, trapped in the ruins. He spent the centuries waiting. He grew insane with the waiting. He forgot much of what he had been, but he remembered his hate. He remembered his fear, and he remembered that he needed a way out. He needed a body. He needed someone foolish enough to enter the city. He needed someone to carry him out into the world so he could continue his work. The story of the fall of Aridhol is a tragedy. It is the story of how a desire for victory can destroy the very thing you are trying to save. King Balwer wanted to save his people. He wanted to protect his city, but in his fear he destroyed them more completely than the Trollocs ever could have. The Trollocs would have just killed their bodies. Mordeth and the suspicion he brought killed their humanity. It twisted them until they were something else. This is the foundation of the curse. It is important to understand that the evil of Shadar Logoth is different from the evil of the Dark One. The Dark One is the ultimate enemy of the light. The Dark One wants to break the wheel of time and remake the world in his own image. But the evil of Shadar Logoth is an evil of the world itself. It is man-made. It is the result of human choices. It is the result of saying that the end justifies the means. It is the result of believing that you can use evil to fight evil without becoming evil yourself. This difference is crucial because these two evils do not like each other. They are like oil and water, or perhaps like fire and ice. They react violently when they touch. The Dark One's power and the power of Shadar Logoth are enemies. A Trolloc will not go into Shadar Logoth unless it is driven by a fear greater than death. A Fade will hesitate at the gates. This specific frequency of evil is what makes the dagger so dangerous, and it is what makes the wound it causes so impossible to heal. So for 2,000 years the city slept. The white walls turned grey with dust, but they stood. The river Aridhol flowed past the walls, carrying boats and traders who looked at the ruins with superstition and fear. They would make the sign against the evil eye as they floated past. They would tell stories to their children about the city of the night. They would say that if you set foot in there, the shadows would grab you. They were right, but the world moves on. History becomes legend, and legend becomes myth. People forget the specific details. They forget the name Mordeth. They forget the name Balwer. They just know it is a bad place. And eventually 3 young boys from a village called Emond's Field would find themselves standing before the gates. They were running from Trollocs. They were running from Fades. They were desperate, and in their desperation they made the same mistake King Balwer made. They thought that the enemy of their enemy might be their friend, or at least they thought that a city the Trollocs feared was a safe place to hide. They were wrong. They were very wrong. When Mat Cauthon and Rand al'Thor and Perrin Aybara walked through those ruined gates, they were stepping into a trap that had been set 2,000 years before they were born. They were walking into the mouth of a beast that had been starving for millennia. They brought with them the innocence of the 2 rivers, but Shadar Logoth does not care about innocence. It only cares about hunger. And so the stage was set for the curse to wake up. The ancient evil of Aridhol was about to touch the modern world. The silence of the city was about to be broken. The mist was beginning to stir in the deep basements. And in a treasure room full of gold and jewels, a dagger with a ruby in its hilt was waiting for a hand to pick it up. It was a beautiful dagger. It looked like a prize, but it was a seed of the same sickness that destroyed a nation. And once that seed is planted, it is very, very hard to dig it out. The sun was setting on the day the boys entered the city. The shadows were getting long. The white stone of the ruins turned orange and then purple in the fading light. The air grew cold. The silence of Shadar Logoth is not a peaceful silence. It is a heavy silence. It is a silence that presses against your ears. It is the silence of a held breath. The boys felt it. They felt the eyes watching them from the empty windows. They felt the weight of the history we have just discussed. They did not know the story of Balwer or the story of the fall. They only knew that something was wrong. They set up camp inside the city. They thought they were safe from the pursuit of the shadow. And for a moment they were. The Trollocs stopped at the river. They would not cross. The boys thought this was a stroke of luck. They did not realize that if the monsters are afraid of a place, you should probably be afraid of it too. This is the lesson of Shadar Logoth. Fear what the dark fears. This brings us to the end of the history of the fall. We have set the scene. We have built the foundation. We know what the city was, and we know what it became. We know the nature of the beast. Now we are ready to see what happens when that beast is unleashed. In the next part of our story, we will walk with the boys into the ruins. We will go down into the dark places. We will meet the man who calls himself Mordeth, and we will see the moment the curse claims its new victim. But for now, let the image of the White City linger in your mind. Picture the silent streets. Picture the fog drifting slowly across the cobblestones. It is a quiet place now, a sleeping place. The danger is there, but it is resting. Let the silence of the city become your silence. Let the stillness of the ruins become your stillness. The history is written, and the past is stone. We can leave it there for tonight. Chapter 2, The Silent City and the Theft. The story continues in the ruins. We have left the history behind us. We have left the time of King Balwer and the Trolloc Wars. We are now in the modern era of the story. The sun was high in the sky when the party rode their horses through the broken gates of Shadar Logoth. The party consisted of Moiraine the Aes Sedai and Lan the Warder, and the three boys from the two rivers named Rand and Mat and Perrin. There was also Egwene and the gleeman Tom Merrilin. They were tired. They had been riding hard for days. They were being chased by a relentless army of monsters. When they saw the white walls of the city, they thought they had found a sanctuary. Lan the Warder knew better. He was a man of stone and silence, and he knew the places of the world that were bad. He did not want to enter the city. He argued with Moiraine. He told her that the city was evil. He told her that it was a place where the shadow waited. But Moiraine was practical. She knew that the Trollocs were right behind them. She knew that the Trollocs would not enter the city. She made a hard choice. She chose the danger of the dead city over the certain death of the Trolloc army. So they rode in. The first thing they noticed was the silence. We talked about this silence before, but now we must truly feel it. It was not the silence of a forest in winter. In a forest you can still hear the wind in the trees or the snap of a twig. In Shadar Logoth the silence was absolute. The horses' hooves made a loud clattering sound on the paving stones. The sound echoed off the white buildings. It echoed too much. It felt like the city was amplifying the sound. It felt like the city was listening. The streets were wide and paved with stone that was cracked and broken by weeds. But the weeds were strange. They were pale and dry. Even the plants did not seem to want to live here. The buildings were enormous. They were palaces made of marble and granite. They had tall windows that looked like dark eyes. There was no glass in the windows, just black holes leading into the dark interiors. The party rode deeper into the city. They were looking for a place to camp. They needed a place that was defensible. They found a building with a collapsed roof that offered some shelter. They set up their camp. The horses were nervous. Animals have a sense for things that humans do not. They rolled their eyes and stamped their feet. They did not want to be there. Lan had to work hard to calm them down. The Aes Sedai set wards around the camp. She used the one power to create a barrier that would alert her if anything came close. But she was tired. The use of magic takes energy, and she had been using it a lot. The three boys were young. They were from a small village where nothing exciting ever happened. Now they were in a ruined city of legend. Despite the fear and the tiredness, they were curious. Boys are always curious. They wanted to see what was in the city. They wanted to explore. Mat Cauthon was the most curious of all. He was the one who always got into trouble. He was the one who always looked for a shortcut or a treasure. Mat convinced Rand and Perrin to go with him. They told the others they were going to look around. They did not go far at first. They walked down the empty streets. They looked up at the giant statues. The statues were of men and women from the old days. They wore strange clothes and held swords or books. Their faces were proud, but the stone was weathered. Some of the statues had lost their noses or their hands. They looked like they were judging the boys. The boys walked deeper into the ruins. They talked in whispers. They felt like they should not speak loudly. The air was cool even though it was day. The shadows stretched out from the buildings. The shadows in Shadar Logoth seemed darker than normal shadows. They seemed to have depth. It felt like you could fall into them. Mat was looking for treasure. He said that a city this big must have something left behind. He imagined finding a sword or a bag of gold. He did not know that the only things left in Shadar Logoth were things that no one should touch. Rand and Perrin were less enthusiastic. They felt the oppression of the place. Perrin especially had sharp senses. He could smell the dust. It smelled old. It smelled like a tomb that had been sealed for 1,000 years. They turned a corner and saw a large building with a dome. It looked like a temple or a palace. The doors were gone. The entrance was a gaping black mouth. Mat went inside. The others followed him because they did not want to be left alone in the street. Inside the building it was dim. Light filtered in through cracks in the dome. The floor was covered in dust. It was a thick, grey dust that rose up in little clouds when they walked. And then they saw him. There was a man standing in the shadows. He did not look like a monster. He looked like a man. He was dressed in clothes that were very old-fashioned. He wore velvet and lace, but the colours were faded. He looked like a noble from a painting. He was not old, and he was not young. He had a face that was smooth, but his eyes were deep. The boys stopped. They were terrified. They had thought the city was empty. To see a person here was more frightening than seeing a ghost. The man smiled at them. It was a polite smile, but it did not reach his eyes. He introduced himself. He said his name was Mordeth. Mordeth spoke to them softly. His voice was like dry leaves scraping together. He told them that he was a treasure hunter. He said he had been in the city for a long time. He said he was looking for the lost riches of Aridhol. This was a lie, of course. We know who he really was. We know he was the ancient counselor who destroyed the city, but the boys did not know. They just saw a strange man. Mordeth played a game with them. He acted friendly. He asked them where they were from. He asked them why they were there. Mat, being Mat, was intrigued by the mention of treasure. He asked Mordeth if he had found anything. Mordeth's eyes gleamed. He gestured for them to follow him. He led them deeper into the building. He led them down a set of stairs. The air got colder as they went down. They entered a large room that was filled with stuff. It was a treasury. There were piles of gold coins. There were silver cups and plates. There were jewels that sparkled in the dim light. It was a fortune. It was more wealth than the boys had ever seen in their lives. In their village, a single gold coin was a lot of money. Here there were mountains of them. Mat's eyes went wide. He moved toward the gold. He wanted to touch it. He wanted to fill his pockets. This is the nature of the trap. Shadar Logoth uses greed. It uses desire. Mordeth watched him. He wanted Mat to take the gold. He needed Mat to take the gold. But Mordeth had a problem. He could not leave the city alone. He was bound to the ruins. He needed someone to help him carry the treasure out. He told the boys that he had gathered all this wealth, but he could not move it by himself. He said that if they helped him move it to the horses, he would share it with them. He offered them a share that would make them kings. Rand and Perrin were hesitant. They felt wrong about this man. They felt a sickness coming from him. But Mat was mesmerized. He was looking at the piles of gold. Then he saw something specific. On top of a pile of coins there was a dagger. It was not a sword. It was a dagger with a curved blade. The scabbard was made of gold and worked with strange symbols. The hilt was wrapped in gold wire. And at the end of the hilt there was a ruby. The ruby was as big as a pigeon's egg. It was dark red. It looked like a drop of blood that had frozen. It was beautiful. It was the most beautiful thing Mat had ever seen. He reached out and picked it up. The moment his skin touched the gold of the dagger, the connection was made. He did not feel it yet, but a link had been forged. A tiny thread of the curse had snapped onto his soul. The dagger was heavy. It felt good in his hand. It felt balanced. He pulled it a little way out of the sheath. The steel was not shiny. It was dull and spotted. It looked old, but it felt sharp. It felt deadly. Mordeth was watching him closely. He was eager. He told them they had to hurry. He said they had to start moving the gold now. He was pushy. He was intense. He started to load sacks with gold. He told the boys to grab a sack. But then the conversation took a turn. Rand, who was polite, mentioned that they were travelling with an Aes Sedai. He mentioned that Moiraine could help them move the treasure with her horses. He thought he was being helpful. He thought this man would be happy to have help from an Aes Sedai. He was wrong. When the word Aes Sedai was spoken, Mordeth froze. His face changed. The polite mask fell away. His face twisted into a mask of pure hate. His lips pulled back from his teeth. He hissed. He spat. He screamed that he would not let the witches of Tar Valon touch his treasure. He screamed that they were spies. He screamed that they were enemies. The transformation was terrifying. Mordeth seemed to swell. He seemed to grow taller. His shadow on the wall did not move like a normal shadow. It reached out toward the boys. He looked like he was going to attack them. He looked like he was going to eat them. The boys panicked. The spell of the gold was broken by the fear of the man. They backed away. Mat shoved the dagger into his coat. He did not think about it. It was instinct. He hid the dagger. He did not want to leave it behind, but he wanted to get away from Mordeth. They turned and ran. They ran up the stairs. They ran out of the treasure room. Mordeth screamed after them. He howled like a wolf. He cursed them. He called upon the darkness to stop them, but he could not leave the room. Or perhaps he could not leave the darkness of the lower levels just yet. The boys burst out of the building into the sunlight. They were gasping for breath. They were shaking. They did not stop running until they were far away from that building. They stopped in the square to catch their breath. They looked at each other. They were pale. They realized that they had almost done something very stupid. Rand and Perrin asked Mat if he had taken anything. They were worried. Mat lied. He touched the lump under his coat where the dagger was hidden. He said no. He said he left it all. This was the first lie. The dagger makes you secretive. It makes you paranoid. It makes you want to keep it safe. Mat was already protecting the dagger. He felt that the dagger was his. He felt that the others would try to take it from him. They returned to the camp. They did not tell Moiraine everything. They were afraid she would be angry. They just said they met a man who was crazy. Moiraine was suspicious, but she had other things to worry about. The sun was going down. The light was fading from the sky. And in Shadar Logoth, night is not just the absence of light. Night is when the city wakes up. As the twilight deepened, the atmosphere changed again. The silence became even heavier. The air became cold. The horses began to scream. It was a horrible sound. A horse screaming in terror is a sound you never forget. Lan jumped up. He had his sword in his hand. The party looked out into the streets, and they saw it. Mashadar. It was not a man. It was not a monster with claws. It was a fog. It was a silver-grey mist that was rolling down the street. It was glowing faintly with its own light. It moved slowly. It did not rush. It rolled over the paving stones like a heavy fluid. It looked soft. It looked like a cloud. But where it touched the stone seemed to smoke. It was coming from everywhere. It was rising from the drains. It was seeping out of the basements. It was coming to surround them. The party realized they were in trouble. They could not fight this. You cannot cut a fog with a sword. You cannot burn a fog that does not feel heat. The mist reached out a tendril. It looked like a long arm made of smoke. It touched one of the horses. The horse fell instantly. It did not struggle. It just died. The flesh seemed to dissolve. The mist rolled over it, and when the mist moved on, there was nothing left but bone. Panic took over. Moiraine shouted for them to run. She shouted for them to get to the horses. But the horses were terrified. They broke their tethers. They scattered. The party was forced to scatter too. The mist was coming from different directions. It was cutting them off from each other. Rand and Mat and Perrin were separated from the others. They ran blindly through the dark streets. The city was a maze. In the dark, every building looked the same. The mist was always behind them. It was always just around the corner. It was herding them. It was hunting them. Mat was running with the dagger pressed against his side. He could feel it through his clothes. It felt cold. It felt like a block of ice, but it also gave him energy. It gave him a frantic energy. He was terrified, but he was also fierce. He would not let the mist take him, and he would not let the mist take his dagger. The night became a blur of terror. They ran until their lungs burned. They dodged the silver tendrils of Mashadar. They saw the fog pouring out of windows above their heads. They saw it pooling in the squares like a lake. They were rats in a trap. Eventually they found a way out. They found the river. The river, Aridhol, flows past the city. The water is the one thing the mist does not like. The mist does not go over deep water. They scrambled onto a boat. It was a desperate escape. They left the city behind them. They floated out into the dark water. Behind them the city of Shadar Logoth glowed in the night. The silver fog had swallowed the streets. It churned and boiled within the walls. It was angry that its meal had escaped, but it had not failed completely. It had planted a seed. Mat Cauthon sat in the boat. He was shivering. He wrapped his arms around himself. He felt the hard shape of the ruby-hilted dagger against his ribs. He did not throw it into the river. He should have. If he had known what it was, he would have thrown it as far as he could, but he didn't. He thought it was just a knife. He thought it was just a piece of gold. He thought he had won a prize. He did not know that the dagger was alive in its own way. He did not know that the dagger was eating him. It was a slow process. It starts with the mind. It starts with suspicion. Why is Rand looking at me like that? Why is Perrin whispering? They want the dagger. They want my treasure. This is the nature of the taint. It isolates you. It makes you like the city. Remember what Aridhol became? A city of isolated people who hated each other. That is what the dagger does to a person. It turns a person into a mini Shadar Logoth. It builds walls inside your mind. It kills the trust. It kills the love, and eventually it kills the man. The escape from the city was the end of the physical danger for a moment, but it was the beginning of the real curse. The boys were out of the ruins, but the ruins were now in the boys. Specifically, in Mat, the dagger was a battery. It was charged with 2,000 years of hate. And now it was plugged into a young man's soul. As the boat drifted down the river, the silence of the night returned. But it was a different silence. It was the silence of the river. The water lapped against the wood of the boat. The crickets chirped on the far bank. Life had returned. But for Mat, the world had changed. The colours were a little duller. The shadows were a little deeper. He touched the hilt of the dagger again just to make sure it was there. It was his comfort. It was his curse. This concludes the second part of our story. We have witnessed the theft. We have seen the mistake. A simple act of greed by a young boy has unlocked a chain of events that will threaten the entire world. The dagger is out of the city. The infection has spread. In the next part, we will watch the sickness take hold. We will see what happens to Mat in the weeks and months that follow. We will see the physical and mental toll of carrying a piece of pure evil in your pocket. We will talk about the paranoia. We will talk about the wasting away. And we will see how the Aes Sedai try to fight something that cannot be healed by normal means. For now, imagine the boat drifting on the dark water. The danger is behind them, or so they think. The white walls of Shadar Logoth are fading into the distance. The silver mist is receding, but the red eye of the ruby is wide open. It is watching, and it is hungry. Rest now. Let the image of the river soothe you. The water is safe. The mist cannot touch you here. The story will wait. The curse will wait. Sleep. Chapter 3. The sickness of the dagger. We move forward in time now. The river is behind us. The ruins of Shadar Logoth are far away, but distances do not matter to a curse. You can run to the other side of the world, but if you carry the curse in your pocket, you are still in the city. Mat Cauthon was carrying the city with him. For a long time, no one knew. Mat was clever. The dagger made him clever. He kept it hidden. He did not wear it on his belt where people could see. He kept it tucked inside his coat. He slept with it under his pillow. He would wake up in the middle of the night and touch it just to make sure it was safe. The change was slow. It was like a winter that comes very gradually. At first, he was just a little more snappy than usual. He would get angry at small things. If Rand asked him a question, he would snap back. If Perrin offered him food, he would look at it suspiciously. He started to think that his friends were talking about him behind his back. Then the physical changes began. Mat had always been a healthy boy. He was full of energy. He was a prankster. But now he began to look tired. He had dark circles under his eyes. His skin became pale. It was a waxy kind of pale. It looked like the color of the pale weeds in the city. He stopped eating as much. He said he wasn't hungry, but the truth was that the dagger was feeding on him, so he didn't need food. The dagger was eating his life force. He became paranoid. Paranoia is the hallmark of the Shadar Logoth evil. He started to mistrust everyone. He mistrusted Moiraine, the Aes Sedai, most of all. He was convinced she wanted the dagger. He was convinced she wanted to hurt him. He would watch her with dark, glittering eyes. When she looked at him, he would flinch. He would wrap his coat tighter around himself. This went on for a long time. The party travelled across the world. They went to the city of Caemlyn. They went through the ways. They went to the border of the Great Blight. All this time, Mat was rotting from the inside. The dagger was like a parasite. It had hooked its claws into his mind. It whispered to him. It didn't speak in words. It spoke in feelings. It made him feel that he was alone. It made him feel that he was the only smart one. Eventually, the secret came out. Moiraine discovered the dagger. When she saw it, she was horrified. She knew what it was. She recognized the evil of Shadar Logoth. She knew that Mat had done something terrible, but she also knew that she could not just take it away from him. This is a very important part of the lore. You might ask, why didn't she just take the knife and throw it away? The answer is that the bond was too strong. Mat and the dagger had become one thing. If she took the dagger away from him, he would die. The shock would kill him. His soul was being sustained by the evil. If you removed the evil, the soul would collapse, so they were in a bind. Mat had to keep the dagger to survive, but the dagger was killing him. It was a slow death versus a fast death. Moiraine did what she could. She used her power to create a barrier. She couldn't heal him, not yet, but she could slow it down. She wrapped flows of the one power around the sickness. She tried to insulate him from the dagger, even while he was holding it. It was a temporary fix. Mat was still sick. He was weak. He could barely walk sometimes. He had to be carried. His memories began to fade. This is another tragedy of the curse. It eats your past. Mat started to forget who he was. He forgot his childhood in the Two Rivers. He forgot the names of people he knew. There were holes in his mind, great big black holes where his life used to be. The dagger made him mean. Mat was never a mean person. He was a trickster, but he had a good heart. The dagger took that heart and twisted it. He said cruel things to his best friend, Rand. He accused Rand of betraying him. He looked at Rand with eyes that were full of the same hate that Mordeth had. It was hard for Rand to watch, to see his friend turning into a monster. Eventually the dagger was lost. In the chaos of the story, the dagger was stolen. A dark friend named Padan Fain took it. We will talk about him later. But for Mat, this was a crisis. He was separated from the dagger. The connection was stretched. He went into withdrawal. The withdrawal was brutal. It was like a drug addict coming off a very strong drug. But worse, his body started to fail completely. He was dying. He needed the dagger back, or he needed to be healed. But normal healing would not work. You cannot heal a curse with a bandage or a poultice. You need something stronger. Mat was taken to the White Tower. This is the home of the Aes Sedai. It is the center of power in the world. The greatest healers in the world were there. The Amirlin Seat, the leader of the Aes Sedai, got involved. They knew that saving Mat was crucial. They also knew it was dangerous. To heal something from Shadar Logoth is to touch the evil, and the evil fights back. The healing ritual was intense. It required a sa'angreal. That is a powerful artifact that amplifies the one power. The Aes Sedai formed a circle. They linked their powers together. They needed massive amounts of energy. They laid Mat on a table. He looked like a corpse. He was just skin and bones. His eyes were sunken. He was barely breathing. They began the ritual. They delved into his body with the power. They went looking for the curse. They found it. It was not a physical thing like a tumor. It was a shadow woven into his threads of life. It was a black mist that was wrapped around his heart and his brain. When the Aes Sedai touched it, the mist screamed. It was not a sound that could be heard with ears. It was a psychic scream. It shook the room. The evil of Shadar Logoth did not want to let go. It fought them. It tried to climb up the flows of power to attack the Aes Sedai. It was vicious. The description of the healing is terrifying. The Aes Sedai described seeing the evil. It looked like oily smoke. As they pulled it out of Mat, it resisted. It tried to snap back. They had to cut it away. They had to burn it away. It took hours. It took all their strength. Finally, they broke the link. They severed the connection between Mat and the dagger. Mat gasped. He arched his back, and then he collapsed. He was free, but he was not whole. The curse was gone, but the scars remained. You cannot hold a piece of pure hate for months and not be changed. Mat survived. He regained his weight. He got his strength back. He became the Mat Cauthon we know and love again. But he was different. The holes in his memory were still there. He could not remember large chunks of his life. The dagger had eaten them, and he had a new darkness in him. Not evil exactly, but a hardness. He knew what evil felt like from the inside. He had a grim sense of humor. He was cynical, and sometimes he could still feel it. Sometimes when he was tired or when it was dark, he would feel a phantom sensation. He would feel the weight of the dagger at his hip. He would reach for it, and it wouldn't be there. It was a phantom limb, the ghost of the curse. The healing at the White Tower was a miracle. It was one of the few times anyone has survived the taint of Shadar Logoth. Usually, once you touch it, you are doomed. Mat was lucky. He had the strongest women in the world fighting for him. And he had his own stubbornness. Mat Cauthon is very stubborn. He refused to die. But the dagger was still out there. The Aes Sedai did not destroy the dagger. They couldn't. They didn't have it. It was with Padan Fain, and that meant the danger was not over. The dagger was still hungry. It was looking for a new host. It was looking for a way to grow. The sickness of the dagger is a lesson. It is a lesson about how evil works. It doesn't always come with an army. It doesn't always come with fire. Sometimes it comes as a gift. Sometimes it comes as a treasure. It comes as something you want. And once you take it, it takes you. It teaches us that isolation is dangerous. The dagger wants you to be alone, because when you are alone, you are weak. It wants you to doubt your friends. It wants you to build walls. The only way to fight it is to trust. But the dagger takes away your ability to trust. It is a perfect trap. Mat's recovery was long. He had to learn to trust again. He had to learn to laugh again. He spent a lot of time eating. He was always hungry after he was healed. It was like his body was trying to fill the emptiness left by the curse. He ate everything in sight, and he played dice. He gambled. Perhaps gambling was a way to deal with the chaos in his life. The story of the sickness is a dark chapter. It is uncomfortable. It deals with mental illness and addiction and the loss of self. But it is necessary to understand the depth of the law. Shadar Logoth is not just a place on a map. It is a condition of the soul. And now we must turn our attention to the other half of this equation. Mat was free, but the dagger was not destroyed. It had found a new master, or rather a new partner, a man who was already dark, a man who was already twisted. When the evil of Shadar Logoth met the evil of Padan Fain, something new was created, something worse. We will explore that in the next part. We will see the amalgamation. We will see what happens when the Hound of the Dark One meets the curse of the city. It is a monstrous union. But for now, let us leave Mat Cauthon sleeping in his bed in the White Tower. He is safe. The mist is gone from his mind. He is dreaming of simple things. He is dreaming of his village. He is dreaming of sheep and green grass. Let him rest. He has earned it. The silence in his room is a good silence. It is the silence of healing. Let that silence wrap around you too. The struggle is over for tonight. The fever has broken. Sleep. Chapter 4. The Amalgamation. We have spoken of the victim. We have spoken of Mat Cauthon and how he suffered under the weight of the curse. But a curse is not just a sickness that happens to people. In the case of Shadar Logoth, the curse is a living thing. It has a will, it has a desire, and while it was eating away at Mat, it was also doing something else. It was looking for a champion. It was looking for a vessel that was stronger than a young farm boy. It found that vessel in a man named Padan Fain. To understand the monster that Padan Fain became, we have to look at who he was before. He was a peddler. He was the man who came to the two rivers in his wagon full of pots and pans and ribbons. He seemed like a normal man. He had a smile and a joke for everyone, but underneath that smile he was rotten. He was a dark friend. He had been a servant of the shadow for a long time. He had travelled to the desolate places of the world. He had gone to the mountain of Shadar Logoth. He had stood before the great lord of the dark. The Dark One had changed him. The Dark One needed a hound to hunt down the dragon reborn. So he took Padan Fain's mind and he distilled it. He stripped away everything that was not necessary for the hunt. He made Fain into a creature that could smell his prey. Fain could feel where Rand al'Thor was. He could sense him miles away. He was compelled to follow. He had no choice. He was a slave to the shadow. When the boys fled into Shadar Logoth, Fain was right behind them. He was leading the Trollocs and the Fades, but he was different from them. They were monsters of flesh and blood. He was a human who had been hollowed out and filled with darkness. When the Trollocs stopped at the riverbank, terrified of the city, Fain did not stop. His masters forced him to go in. The fear of the Dark One was greater than the fear of the ruins. So Padan Fain entered the silent city. He walked through the white gates. He walked down the empty streets where the weeds were pale and the statues watched with stone eyes. He was hunting. He was looking for the boys. But he found something else. He found the spirit of Mordeth. We remember Mordeth, the ancient counselor, the man who had been trapped in the ruins for 2,000 years. Mordeth was a ghost. He was a soul without a body. He was desperate. He had tried to trick the boys into taking the treasure so he could escape, but they had run away. Now here was another man, a man who was alone, a man who was already dark. Mordeth saw Fain. He saw a vessel. He saw a chance to leave his prison. Mordeth attacked. He tried to consume Padan Fain's soul. He tried to take over his body just like the mist takes over the city. He wanted to wipe Fain away and wear his skin like a suit of clothes. But something unexpected happened. Mordeth made a mistake. He did not realize what Fain was. Fain was not a normal man. Fain's soul had been touched by the Dark One. It had been altered. It was hardened. When Mordeth tried to seep into Fain, he did not find an empty space. He found a wall of pure evil. The two evils collided. The ancient, cold human evil of Shadar Logoth crashed into the hot, chaotic, external evil of the Dark One that was inside Fain. They were different frequencies, they were opposites, but they did not destroy each other. They merged. It was a violent fusion. It was like two storms crashing together to make a hurricane. Mordeth could not push Fain out, and Fain could not push Mordeth out. They swirled together, they twisted, they knotted, they became one. The man who stood up from that struggle was no longer just Padan Fain, and he was no longer just Mordeth. He was something new. He was an amalgamation. He was a hybrid. He had the memories of both. He had the skills of both. He had the cunning of the peddler and the ancient knowledge of the counselor. This created a unique being in the world of the Wheel of Time. Before this, there were only two sides. You were either for the light, or you were for the shadow. You fought for the Creator, or you fought for the Dark One. But Fain represented a third faction. He hated the light, of course. He hated Rand and his friends, but now he also hated the shadow. The part of him that was Mordeth remembered that the shadow was the enemy. The part of him that was Fain remembered the torture he had suffered at the hands of the Dark One. He hated everyone. He wanted to destroy the Dark One just as much as he wanted to destroy the dragon. He became a rogue agent, an agent of chaos. This new creature was terrifyingly powerful. Because he had the soul of Mordeth inside him, he was no longer afraid of Shadar Logoth. In fact, he was the master of it. The city recognized him. The mist recognized him. Mashadar, the great white fog that eats souls, did not hurt him. It greeted him. It was part of him. He could control the mist. He could call it. He could carry it with him. When he left the city, he did not leave the power behind. He became a walking Shadar Logoth. Let's talk about his capabilities. This new Fain was dangerous in a way that Trollocs are not. A Trolloc is just a beast with a sword. Fain was a sorcerer of shadows. He developed strange powers. One of the most unsettling powers was his ability to hurt you through your shadow. He didn't need to touch you. If he could touch your shadow on the ground, he could drive a psychic nail into it. You would feel the pain. You would feel the cold spreading up from your shadow into your body. It was a violation of the laws of nature. He also had a corrupting influence on everything he touched. He could take people, dark friends or even white cloaks, and he could twist their minds. He didn't use the one power, he used words. He used the same poison that Mordeth had used on King Balwa. He could whisper in a captain's ear and turn him into a fanatic. He could make men suspicious. He could make them cruel. He created little pockets of Shadar Logoth wherever he went. But his most terrifying feat happened in the Ways. The Ways are a magical transport system. They are tunnels through the void grown by Ogier stonemasons with the one power long ago. They were once beautiful, but they had gone dark. A creature called Mashin Shin, the Black Wind, roamed the Ways. The Black Wind is a mindless force of destruction. It eats people, it drives them mad. Even the Forsaken, the most powerful servants of the Dark One, are afraid of the Black Wind. When Fain entered the Ways, the Black Wind came for him. It howled, it screamed, it wanted to eat him. But when it touched him, it recoiled. The Black Wind felt the evil of Shadar Logoth inside Fain. It felt a hunger that was greater than its own. Fain did not fear the wind. He laughed at it. He fed on it. The lore says that Fain corrupted the Black Wind. He imparted his own madness into it. The wind began to hunt specifically for Fain's enemies. It began to whisper with Fain's voice. This shows the sheer potency of the Shadar Logoth taint. It is so toxic that it can make a monster sick. It is so evil that even the darkness of the void is afraid of it. Now we must speak of the dagger again, the ruby-hilted dagger. Fain eventually stole it. He took it from the Aes Sedai. When he got the dagger back, he was complete. The dagger was the focus of Mordeth's power. When Fain held it, he was whole. He became Shaisum. That was the name he would eventually give himself. It means peace in the old tongue, but it was an ironic name. He was not peace. He was the silence of the grave. The most critical moment in the story of this amalgamation, and the most important piece of lore regarding the mechanics of this curse, happened when Fain finally caught up with Rand al'Thor. It happened in the mist. It happened in a place of confusion. Fain struck out. He did not use a sword. He used the dagger. He slashed Rand across the side. Now, Rand already had a wound in his side. He had been wounded by Baalzamon, who was Ishamael, the leader of the Forsaken. That wound was caused by the true power, which is the essence of the Dark One. It was a wound of fire and darkness. It would never heal. It was a constant source of pain for Rand. When Fain struck, he slashed the dagger across that exact same spot. He cut right through the old wound. This should have killed Rand instantly. The poison of the dagger is lethal. One scratch is enough to kill a man in minutes. The mist of the dagger races to the heart and stops it. And the wound from Ishamael was already killing him slowly. To have both at once should have been the end, but the law of the Wheel of Time is built on balance. It is built on opposites. What happened next is a fascinating piece of metaphysical mechanics. The two evils, the evil of the Dark One in the old wound and the evil of Shadar Logoth from the dagger, met inside Rand's body. They recognized each other and they hated each other. Instead of working together to kill Rand, they started to fight each other. The heat of the Dark One's wound attacked the cold of the dagger's poison. The corruption of Shadar Logoth attacked the corruption of the shadow. They were so busy fighting each other that they ignored the man they were inhabiting. They formed an equilibrium, a painful, throbbing equilibrium. The two wounds vibrated against each other. The dagger's poison tried to stop Rand's heart, but the Dark One's energy burned it back. The Dark One's energy tried to consume Rand, but the Shadar Logoth taint formed a barrier of suspicion and hardness that held it at bay. This is known as the law of the two wounds. It is the physical proof of the difference between the two evils. It proves that Shadar Logoth is a power equal to the shadow but opposite in frequency. It is like acid and base. They neutralize each other, but the reaction is violent. For Rand, this was agony. He lived with constant pain. He carried the war between the two powers in his own flesh, but it saved his life. If Fain had stabbed him in the other side, Rand would have died. The fact that the wounds crossed was the only thing that kept him alive. Fain did not know this would happen. He wanted to kill Rand. He wanted to nail his shadow to the wall. When Rand survived, Fain's hatred grew even deeper. He became obsessed. He followed Rand everywhere. He lurked in the background of the story, always watching, always plotting. As time went on, Fain became less human. The amalgamation continued to evolve. He started to look different. His face became more gaunt. His nose became like a beak. He started to smell wrong. Not a smell of dirt, but a smell of old dust and cold stone, the smell of the city. He began to transform the places he stayed. If he slept in a room, the room would feel wrong afterwards. The shadows in the corners would stay even at noon. The insects would die on the window sills. He was leaking Shadar Logoth into the world. He was a carrier of a spiritual plague. He gathered followers, but they were not friends, they were zombies. He turned men into husks. He filled them with the mist. They would fight for him, but they had no minds of their own. They were just extensions of his will. He was building a new Aridhol. He was trying to turn the whole world into a graveyard of white stone and silence. The existence of Padan Fain is a tragedy, but it is also a warning. He represents what happens when you have no loyalty to anything but yourself. He had no cause, he had no friends. He was purely selfish. And because he was selfish, he became a vacuum. He sucked everything into himself. The Dark One wanted to rule the world. The Creator wanted the world to flourish. Fain just wanted the world to stop. He wanted it to be quiet. He wanted to be the last thing standing on a pile of ash. The amalgamation of Fain and Mordeth is one of the most frightening concepts in the lore because it is unpredictable. The Dark One follows rules. The Dark One has a logic. He wants to break the wheel, but Fain was madness. He was a wild card. He could appear anywhere. He could hurt anyone. He was the knife in the dark that has no master. In the grand scheme of things, Fain was small compared to the Forsaken. He did not have armies of Trollocs. He did not have the access to the true power, but he was sharper. He was more personal. The Forsaken wanted to defeat the dragon. Fain wanted to hurt Rand al'Thor. It was personal. It was intimate. And all the while, the mist of Mashadar swirled around his ankles. It protected him. It hid him. It was his blanket and his weapon. The city of Shadar Logoth was destroyed eventually. We will get to that. But as long as Fain lived, the city lived. He carried the blueprints of Aridhol in his blood. He carried the scream of the dying city in his throat. So we have this creature roaming the world, a man who is not a man, a ghost who is not a ghost, a walking wound in the pattern of the age. He is the ultimate scavenger. He picks up the scraps of power left behind by others and twists them into something ugly. This concludes the fourth part of our journey. We have seen the birth of a new monster. We have seen how the curse evolved from a stationary trap in a ruin to a mobile predator that hunts its enemies. We have understood the mechanics of the two wounds and how the evil of Shadar Logoth fights the evil of the shadow. The board is set for the final act. The players are in motion. The city of Shadar Logoth is waiting for its final purpose. It has been a prison and it has been a weapon. But soon it will become a sacrifice. In the final part of our story, we will see the end of the city. We will see the cleansing. We will see how the greatest stain on the male half of the true source was removed using the only thing in the universe capable of eating it. We will see the destruction of Shadar Logoth. It will be a cataclysm, a moment of pure white light and pure black darkness annihilation each other. But for now, leave Padan Fain in the shadows. Let him lurk. He cannot hurt you here. You are safe in the light. You are safe in the quiet. The mist is far away. The dagger is sheathed. The story pauses. The world breathes. Take a moment to feel the safety of your own room. The walls are solid. The shadows are just shadows. There are no eyes watching you from the corners. It is just peace. Real peace. Not the peace of Shysum. The peace of rest. Close your eyes. Drift. The end is coming, but not yet. Not yet. Sleep. Chapter 5. Annihilation. We have arrived at the end of the road. We have walked through the history of Aridhol. We have seen the city fall into shadow. We have seen the birth of Mashadar. We have watched the dagger leave the ruins in the pocket of a young man. We have seen the sickness spread, and we have seen it merge with the soul of a dark friend to create a monster. Now we must see how it all ends. We must see the final purpose of Shadar Logoth. For thousands of years the city stood as a monument to hate. It was a useless scar on the world. It served no purpose other than to kill the unwary and to breed evil. But the wheel of time weaves as the wheel wills. Nothing in the pattern is truly wasted. Even a curse can be used if you have the right hands to hold it. And Rand al'Thor, the dragon reborn, had very strong hands. Rand had a problem. It was the biggest problem in the world. The male half of the true source, called Sidin, was tainted. The Dark One had touched it 3,000 years ago. He had covered it in a layer of rancid, oily filth. Any man who touched the power to do good had to reach through that filth first. It drove them mad. It caused the breaking of the world. It was the reason men who could channel were hunted down. Rand needed to clean it. He needed to wipe the grease off the lens. But how do you clean a river of energy that flows through the universe? You cannot use a towel. You cannot use soap. You need something that eats evil. You need an acid that is strong enough to dissolve the Dark One's touch. Rand remembered his wound. He remembered the pain in his side. He remembered the theory of the two wounds. He remembered that the evil of Shadar Logoth and the evil of the Dark One were opposites. They hated each other. They destroyed each other on contact. He realized that Shadar Logoth was not just a ruin, it was a filter, it was a magnet. He came up with a plan. It was a plan so dangerous that most of the Aes Sedai thought he was insane. He was going to use the city of Shadar Logoth to clean the power. He was going to siphon the entire ocean of Sidin through the city. He was going to force the Taint into the mist. He believed that the mist would attack the Taint. He believed they would eat each other until nothing was left. So the stage was set. Rand travelled to the city. He brought Nynaeve with him. She was one of the strongest female channelers in the world. He needed a woman to help him. They had to link their powers. He needed her to be the tube. He needed her to form the conduit while he handled the pressure. They also brought the most powerful magical artifacts ever made, the Chuidan Kal. These were giant statues that acted as keys. They allowed a person to draw so much power that they could melt the continents. They arrived at Shadar Logoth in the afternoon. The sun was pale. The winter trees were bare. The city was waiting. It was always waiting. The white walls were silent. The domes were silent. But the silence felt different today. It felt tense. It felt like the city knew its time was up. The mist was deep in the basements, but it was stirring. It could feel the amount of power that was gathering. Rand and Nynaeve sat down on a hill outside the city. They could look down into the streets. They could see the broken statues and the empty palaces. It looked peaceful in a dead sort of way. Rand planted the access key into the ground. He took a deep breath. He looked at Nynaeve. She was afraid, but she was ready. They linked. The description of the amount of power they drew is hard to comprehend. It was not a river. It was an ocean. It was a sun. They drew so much power that the air around them began to distort. Gravity began to bend. They were holding enough energy to crack the world in half, like an egg. Then Rand began the work. He did not throw the power at the city. He created a weave. Think of it like a pipe, a giant pipe made of pure spirit. He connected one end of the pipe to the source of the Taint. He connected the other end of the pipe to the city of Shadar Logoth. Specifically, he connected it to Shadar Logoth's hunger. He began to pump. He forced Sidin through the pipe. He forced the power to flow into the city. But he aimed it so that the clean power would slip through, but the filth would get caught. He used the city as a sieve. The reaction was instant, and it was violent. Inside the city, Mashadar woke up. The mist rose from the ground. It did not drift slowly this time. It exploded upwards. It sensed the Taint. It sensed the touch of the Dark One. To Mashadar, this was not just an enemy. It was food. It was the ultimate prey. The hate that had been festering in Aridhol for 2,000 years finally had a target. The mist surged. It turned from grey to a blinding white. It filled the streets. It filled the palaces. It rose above the walls. It formed a dome, a gigantic dome of thrashing white fog that completely covered the city. It was huge. It was miles wide. Inside that dome, a war was happening. The Taint poured in. It was black and oily. It smelled like rot. The mist attacked it. The white fog tore into the black oil. They grappled. They burned. The sound was not a sound you could hear with your ears. It was a vibration in the bones. It was a screeching sound that echoed in the soul. It was the sound of two absolute evils murdering each other. The ground shook. The stones of the city began to vibrate. They were cracking. The statues were crumbling. The physical reality of Shadar Logoth was being torn apart by the pressure of the battle happening in the spiritual realm. The city was the bowl, and the bowl was breaking. Rand held on. The strain was immense. He was channeling more power than any man had ever channeled. He was forcing the entire weight of the Dark One's corruption into a space only a few miles wide. He was sweating, he was shaking. Nynaeve was fainting from the pressure, but she held on. She was the anchor. The dome of mist grew larger. It began to glow. It pulsed with light. Black lightning crackled inside the white fog. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying. The taint was vast. There was so much of it. It had accumulated for 3,000 years. But the hunger of Shadar Logoth was bottomless. Mashadar ate and ate. It consumed the filth, and in the process, it consumed itself. This is the key to the annihilation. The acid neutralizes the base. As Mashadar destroyed the taint destroyed Mashadar. They were cancelling each other out. The mass of the mist was growing, but its substance was thinning. It was burning fuel at an impossible rate, and this went on for hours. The sun went down, and the dome of light illuminated the countryside for miles. The forces of the shadow tried to stop it. The Forsaken came to attack. They sensed what was happening. They knew that if the taint was removed, the Dark One would lose his greatest weapon against the channelers. But we will not focus on their battle. That was just a distraction. The real story was the city. Finally, the end came. The last drops of the taint were squeezed through the pipe. The channel was clean. Saidin was pure. The river of power flowed clear and sweet for the first time in millennia. But inside the dome, the reaction had reached critical mass. The pressure was too high. The paradox was too great. The city could not sustain it. The dome of mist began to collapse. It did not fall down, it fell inward, it shrank. It turned from white to black to a color that has no name. It was compressing. The walls of Aridhol gave way, the ground gave way, the bedrock gave way. There was a sound like the world snapping a bone. And then it was gone. There was no explosion. There was no fire. There was just a sudden absence. The dome vanished, the city vanished, the ruins vanished. Where Shadar Logoth had stood for 2,000 years, there was now only a hole, a massive crater. It was perfectly round, it was deep. The stone around the edges was smooth as glass. The city had been scooped out of the world. It had been annihilated completely. Not a single stone was left, not a single statue, not a wisp of mist. Rand and Nynaeve collapsed on the hilltop. They were exhausted, they were empty, but they were alive. They looked down at the crater. The sun was coming up. The light touched the edge of the great hole. It was silent, but it was not the silence of Shadar Logoth. It was not the heavy, waiting silence. It was a clean silence. It was the silence of an empty room after a noisy party. It was the silence of a fresh snow. The wind blew across the crater, and it made a clean sound. The birds began to sing in the distance. The curse of Aridhol was broken. The city that had killed a nation was gone. It had served its purpose. It had died to save the world. It was a strange redemption for such an evil place. But there was one loose end. One piece of Shadar Logoth had not been in the city when it fell. One piece had escaped the annihilation. Padan Fain, he was still out there. He was still carrying the essence of Mordeth. He was still Shysum. When the city was destroyed, Fain felt it. He felt a great ripping sensation in his soul. The anchor was gone. The source was gone. He was no longer a remote extension of the city. He was now the only Shadar Logoth. This drove him to his final madness. He retreated to the Blight. He went to the valley of Thakandar. He began to change even more. Without the city to ground him, he became more mist than man. He became a wandering fog. He lost his physical form almost completely. He became a creature of pure corruption. During the last battle, the final confrontation of the age, Fain was there. He walked through the battlefield like a ghost. He did not care about the light or the shadow. He killed Trollocs and he killed men. He turned them into zombies. He was building his own army of the dead. He thought he was going to be the new Dark One. He thought that after Rand and the Dark One destroyed each other, he would step in and rule the silence. But he ran into an old friend. He ran into Mat Cauthon. It was fitting. It was poetic. Mat was the one who took the dagger. Mat was the one who carried the infection. Mat was the one who suffered the most. And now Mat was the one who had to end it. Fain tried to kill Mat. He used the mist. He tried to rip Mat's soul out, but Mat was immune. Mat had carried the dagger for so long that his soul had built up a resistance. He had been healed by the Aes Sedai. He was vaccinated against Shadar Logoth. The mist washed over him, and it did not bite. Fain was confused. He faltered. And in that moment of confusion, Mat struck. He did not use magic. He did not use a legendary sword of light. He used his luck, and he used his skill. He stabbed Fain. It was a quick fight. It was almost anticlimactic. But that is the way of the wheel. Evil is often banal in the end. Fain fell, and as he died, the mist evaporated. The last vestige of Mordeth dissolved. The last echo of Aridhol faded away. The dagger which Fain had carried for so long was gone. It dissolved with him. The ruby hilt that had tempted a boy in a treasure room turned to dust. The gold turned to vapor. The loop was closed. The curse was truly dead. So we are left at the end of the story. The crater in the ground is filling with water. It will become a lake, a clean lake. The grass will grow over the scars. The name Shadar Logoth will be forgotten. It will become a story that grandmothers tell to frighten children, but it will have no power. The story of the curse is a heavy one. It is full of darkness and paranoia. But the ending is a good one. It reminds us that even the deepest stain can be cleaned. It reminds us that wounds can heal, even if they leave scars. Mat Cauthon went on to live a long life. He had a family, he laughed, he played dice. He never forgot the dagger, but he did not let it define him. He was a survivor, and the world was better for it. The power was clean. The men who could channel were no longer doomed to madness. The wind that blew from the north was no longer tainted. Now I want you to picture that crater one last time. Picture it as a lake. The water is blue and still. The sky is reflected in the surface. It is a peaceful place. The evil is gone. The hate is gone. There is only the earth and the water and the sky. Let go of the tension in your body just as the world let go of the city. Let the silence of the lake fill your mind. It is a deep, cool silence. There are no whispers here. There is no fog, just clarity. The story is done. The book is closed. The history is written. You can rest now. You have walked through the ruins, and you have come out the other side. You are safe. The night is quiet. The stars are watching. Sleep.